This is David Gray, Mandan, North Dakota. Today is November 29th, 2022. This presentation chronicles the leadership of Roman Catholic Bishop Vincent Ryan at the time of the North Dakota Anti-Garb law campaign of 1948. On June 29th of 1948, North Dakota voters enacted a legislative initiative that prohibited Catholic sisters from wearing religious garb while teaching in public schools in the state. The anti-garb bill was a culmination of a prolonged battle to drive Catholic sisters from public schools. A shortage of qualified teachers and insufficient funding for public education resulted in the hire of sisters to teach in public schools during the first half of the 20th century. Fearing Catholic Church inroads in public education, many Protestant communities opposed Catholic sisters teaching in public schools. Just a note on historical sources for this presentation. The archives of the Diocese of Bismarck and the Benedictine Assumption Abbey in Richardson, North Dakota, have Bishop Ryan's papers and files on the 1948 anti-garb movement in North Dakota. I worked with the Chancellor of the Diocese of Bismarck and the Archivist of Assumption Abbey for access to their archival resources. And additionally, I relied on the online resources of the State Historical Society of North Dakota for many photographic images. Bishop Ryan was the bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Bismarck from 1940 to 1951. Bishop Ryan was born in 1883 in Arlington, Wisconsin, and raised on the family farm and attended high school for 2 years, and in 1902 entered the St. Francis Seminary in Milwaukee. From 1906 to 1912, he studied at the St. Paul Seminary School of Divinity in Minneapolis. Seeking a career as a missionary, he was accepted by North Dakota's Bishop John Shanley into the Diocese of Fargo. He was later made the Chancellor of the Diocese of Fargo. He was, in 1940, appointed the second bishop of the Diocese of Bismarck by Pope Pius XII. During his 11-year tenure, Ryan constructed 69 churches, including the Cathedral of the Holy Spirit. Bishop Ryan founded the diocesan newspaper, Dakota Catholic Action, in 1941, and is best remembered as an opponent of the 1948 anti-garb law, which prohibited Catholic sisters from wearing religious garb while teaching in North Dakota public schools. To prohibit sisters from teaching in public schools, a legislative initiative was devised to prevent the wearing of religious garb, that is Catholic nun habits, in public schools in the state. Proponents of the anti-garb bill believed the prohibition of habits would drive the sisters from public schools. The anti-garb bill was approved by a majority of North Dakota voters in the summer of 1948. Beginning in 1933, a case was brought to North Dakota District Court to prevent three sisters employed by a local school district to stop wearing religious garb and stop payment of the sisters' salaries from the school board fund. The district court ruled against the plaintiffs, and they appealed to the North Dakota Supreme Court. The plaintiffs argued that the sisters' garb and salaries violated the principle of separation of church and state. The North Dakota Supreme Court ruled against the plaintiffs. The Supreme Court ruled that the presence of the sisters in a public school did not violate the North Dakota Constitution. By 1947, the State Department of Public Instruction reported there were 74 nuns and 8 priests teaching in 20 school districts in 11 counties in North Dakota. Most of the schools were in the impoverished western portion of the state, the counties that comprise the Diocese of Bismarck. Undeterred, the opponents for the separation of church and state in 1948 organized, and the group included 29 Protestant ministers, 1 school superintendent, and the state secretary of the Masonic Lodge. They formed a creative drive to get an initiated measure on the June 1948 primary ballot to forbid wearing of religious garb in public schools. They needed 10,000 signatures and collected substantially more. Before they filed the petitions with the North Dakota Secretary of State to put the initiated measure on the ballot, the Committee for the Separation of Church and State approached Bishop Ryan in March 1948 and asked him to withdraw the sisters from the public schools or they will file the petitions to get the matter on the ballot. Bishop Ryan refused to comply. He said he had not asked the sisters to teach in public schools and had no authority in their hiring. The employment of sisters was a matter for the school boards and parents. And he made his position known to North Dakota newspaper readers. The Committee for the Separation of Church and State filed the petitions with the Secretary of State, and the initiated measure appeared on the June 29, 1948 ballot. The opponents of the initiated measure organized under the auspices of the two Catholic bishops of North Dakota, a committee for the defense of civil rights. Headed by Catholic laymen, the committee enlisted non-Catholics as well as Catholics to fight the anti-garb bill, condemning it for dragging religion into politics and for deliberately fostering hatred and dissension within the country. The statewide debate over the anti-garb bill was largely contained to meetings, saturation of churches with pamphlets and leaflets, pronouncements from the pulpits, and word of mouth. Few North Dakota newspapers would run articles or ads for the Committee for the Separation of Church and State. Out of the 10 North Dakota daily papers at the time, 7 refused any content. Similarly, 9 out of 11 North Dakota radio stations refused to carry ads for the Committee for the Separation of Church and State as well. There was no TV in North Dakota until WDAY TV in Fargo went on the air in 1949. Bishop Ryan actively worked against the initiated measure. Through his network of parish priests, he tasked them to contact local newspaper publishers and radio stations to encourage them to remain neutral on the issue and carry no ads, pro or con. Bishop Ryan tracked progress on the media and speaking campaign against the initiated measure. Many publishers obliged, feeling the initiated measure represented an issue of bigotry and discrimination. On Election Day, June 29th, the anti-garb bill passed, approximately 93,000 to 83,000. The total vote on the anti-garb bill was greater than the total vote for governor in the last general election, making the issue one of the most hotly contested in the state's history. Catholics observed the vote as a hollow victory, noting more than 50,000 non-Catholic North Dakotans voted to allow religious garb. So the anti-garb bill became law, and it's still on the books. The language of the law is brief. No teacher in any public school in this state shall wear in said school or while engaged in the performance of his or her duties as such teacher any dress or garb indicating that the garb that such teacher is a member of or an adherent of any religious order, sect, or denomination. Contrary to the expectations of the anti-garb proponents, school districts continue to employ sisters as teachers. Bishop Ryan, in advance of the election, had sought and gained approval from the Vatican Sacred Congregation for Religious a rescript or waiver that permitted sisters to shed their habits and wear ordinary dress while working as teachers in public schools. Sisters continued to teach in a few public schools in North Dakota till the early 1960s. It's interesting to note that this is the only, albeit the best organized instance of anti-Catholicism in North Dakota history. In the 1948-1949 school year, sisters remained in 12 of the 19 public schools in which they had been teaching. 5 of the other 7 public schools became parochial schools. A total of 65 sisters were affected by the anti-garb law. In obedience to the rescript from the Holy See, the sisters first donned old women's Army Corps uniforms, but the sisters thought that these were too uniform like. They later opted to wear simple conservative attire. Thank you for your attention.